Good morning, everyone. I think we still have people joining us, but in the interest of staying on our schedule, we will go ahead and begin. My name is Caroline Miller, and I'm the chair of the BC Association for Charitable Gaming. I'm based in Kelowna, and as you know, our BCACG members and board directors are scattered throughout the province. And we are very pleased today that the gaming branch from Victoria is able to join us, the community gaming branch. And we do have three staff members with us who will be taking over the presentation and doing that on a handoff basis, I believe. And then at the end, they very generously agreed to take your questions. We already have a few. And if you do have a question, feel free to just post it in the chat function. And Kalina Kwan, who is our executive director, Kalina and I will help manage that session at the end for about 10 or 15 minutes. And we do hope to be able to get to all your questions. If for some reason there are questions posted that we don't get to because of time, we will certainly record all of that information. We will try to get the answers from the gaming branch and get those back out to you. I just have one quick note before I introduce our guests. We're going to have a short break before our two 45-minute workshops that follow at 11:45. And then immediately after those workshops, the BCACG has its annual general meeting. And I want to sincerely invite you to join the AGM at 12:30. I can promise it will be short. We've rehearsed it and it's about 15 minutes at the most. We do need to make quorum, and all of you in organizations know how important that is. So I ask you to give just a few minutes of your time to us at 12:30 today. Now, our guests for this morning's community gaming branch presentation, we have three guests. The first is Denise Mayon, Manager, Policy and Community Outreach. Second, we have Amy Higginbotham. Amy's a director with the branch. And third, we have David Pyatt. David is the executive director. So I'm going to pass the floor over to the branch now and again, thank them for their time this morning.
Hi everyone. Hopefully you can hear me okay. So I'm Denise. I'm the new kid on the block with the team. As Caroline mentioned, I'm the manager of policy and community outreach. I just started in this role a couple of months ago, so I'm very quickly learning the ropes. It's very nice to be able to be here with you all today, albeit virtually. But at least it'll give you a chance to know who I am in case you need to reach out to me at any point in the future. And just quickly, I've been in government for a number of years now, and most recently I was with the sport branch at the Ministry of Tourism, Arts and Culture. So I'm quite familiar with the sport sector and not-for-profits in terms of the sport world, but getting up to speed in all the other sectors for all the programs that all you folks are involved with across the province. So maybe I'll just quickly turn it over to Amy and then David to say a little hello, and then we'll get into things.
Okay, just briefly, I am Amy Higginbotham. I've had the privilege of being with this program now since mid-2018. So yeah, looking forward to this presentation and hearing some of your questions at the end.
Good morning. Again, my name is David Pyatt. I'm the acting executive director, and this will be my fifth BCACG symposium, so in a row. So it's a pleasure to be here today to see you all virtually.
Excellent. Okay, well, we'll get going here. Obviously, when we do our acknowledgement of traditional land, usually we're all together in the same place. So this looks a little bit different than what we're used to. But for David, Amy, and myself, we're speaking to you today from Victoria, which is the unceded Coast Salish territory of the Lekwungen people, which is known today as the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nation. So we just kind of want to take a moment and invite you all to acknowledge the traditional territory where you're currently doing this presentation from today. So now I will go into our agenda for the next hour or so. We're going to spend a bit of time talking about, the last year, our 2019-20 grant year, and just give you an overview of the kind of key highlights from that year for us. We're going to talk a bit about where we're currently at, our current grant year, the 2020-2021 grant year, just a bit of a mouthful there. We'll be talking about our grant year, but obviously one of the big kind of significant things that's going on right now is COVID-19. So we'll spend a bit of time talking about that. We'll then move to what's next for us. So next year's grant year, the 2021-2022 grant year. And we'll talk a bit about the 2021 guideline update that we're working on, and a little bit about public reporting that we've also been working on. And then we're going to turn to a couple of selected topics where we'll do a little bit of a deeper dive on some recurring topics that have come up that we thought would be of value to spend a little bit more time talking about. And those are talking about the program descriptions in the application, gaming account summary reports, some best practices for board communications, and talking a little bit about funding increases and how to successfully ask for a funding increase. And then at the end, we're going to open it up for Q&A. So that's kind of our outline for the next little bit. So we'll get going. And I believe I am passing it over to Amy now.
Yes, thank you, Denise. So I'll go through this part fairly quickly because we've got a lot of material to get through, but we just kind of wanted to show you guys a little bit of an overview of how our funding is distributed. This is the little pie chart that Denise has put together. This is for our 135 million regular grant program, so it doesn't include our $5 million capital program. And so you can see at the bottom there, that dark purple blob, that's the human and social services sector. So that's all the social service kind of organizations. And we've got arts and culture received 19.3 million. PACs got just under 12 million. Environment sector, our smallest sector, received 4.7 million. And public safety received 6.1 million. So that's just kind of an overview of where our funds went. I think it's important to kind of remind everybody, and it's kind of a unique feature of this program, that we really do provide funding for all applications that we receive that meet our eligibility criteria that are outlined in our guidelines document. So unlike other grant programs where you might be funding 10, 20, 30% of your applications, we typically fund 90% of all of the applications that we receive. So very high rate of approval. Last year, for example, we received 5,700 applications, and we ended up providing funding to more than 5,000 of those organizations. So pretty good chance of getting funding if you kind of go through our materials. Okay, and then we just move to the next slide. So I'm just going to talk briefly about our capital project program. And I just want to make clear that this is our separate kind of larger capital grant program, which we provide grants of up to $250,000 for organizations. This is separate than the capital projects and capital that can be applied for as part of our regular program. So I just think it's good to remind everybody, you are able to request separate funding for capital, typically under $20,000 worth, with your regular application. So this slide is kind of about our bigger grants that go out under the separate program. So the capital program, this was launched as a sort of distinct $5 million program back in 2017. So we now have kind of 3 years worth of recipients, and that's that table that Denise has put together there. So since we started providing these grants, we've been able to support 260 very cool projects throughout BC, including 64 projects that we were able to fund last year. And some of the examples, I mean, it's this adjudicating this program is kind of one of my favorite parts of this job, because it's a competitive process and we just see like such amazing projects, and it's just really neat to kind of go through all the applications. So some of the projects that we have funded over the last 3 years through this program include roof replacements, accessibility upgrades, like, you know, accessible washrooms and wheelchair ramps. We've done heritage building restorations, theater lighting, theater seating. We've contributed towards the construction of childcare facilities. And we funded quite a few vehicles, accessible vans, buses, mobile clinics. You know, we've done a couple big soccer field turf replacement projects. So really a huge range of projects through this program. Maybe just go to the next slide, Denise. So this slide is kind of just in terms of what's happening with our capital project program this year, which we've just wrapped up sort of the program's adjudication of those applications. This year we received 242 applications across all of our sectors, and they requested in total $24 million. So as you know, we've got $5 million to spend, so we've adjudicated those applications through a very specific scoring system, which is outlined in our guidelines. This year, we did stipulate that we would be likely prioritizing applications that were going to be supporting organizations through the COVID-19 pandemic. So I think you'll see when the results are released that many of the funded applications this year will be sort of for that purpose. And that's, you know, we saw this year, we saw a lot of applications for, actually saw a lot of applications for kind of virtual delivery of programs. So IT and computer hardware and things like that. We saw a lot of applications for organizations that wanted to reconfigure their spaces to enable social distancing. We saw applications from organizations that, you know, were really facing unprecedented demand due to the pandemic. For example, food banks and mental health providers and organizations of that nature. So, like I said, we've just finished the sort of the first stage of adjudicating those applications, and we are likely to be able to announce the results of that program shortly. I think that's all I had on this one, so I'm going to hand it back to Denise.
Okay, and I'm actually going to hand it over to David. David's going to take us through the next couple of slides here. So over to you, David.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're into the current period of the year, 2021, and it's been a big year with, of course, COVID-19 being a huge factor from the very beginning of this fiscal year. So we've seen that BC's not-for-profit sector is quickly pivoted to continue to provide essential services to BC residents. And many of these people, as we know, fit into the category of vulnerable populations and who have been extraordinarily impacted by COVID. So we'd like to thank all of your organizations for the great work that you're doing in helping these populations weather this terrible pandemic. And we know it's not an easy thing to do. So we've also heard from many organizations who've had to modify, or unfortunately, some of them have had to cancel. Others have postponed their programming and services because of this pandemic. And this has, of course, created numerous challenges for everybody. We've heard that cash flow is a real issue, and having access to funds, liquid funds, is putting organizations into a difficult spot. And we recognize it's hard to have a fundraiser when you can't all get together. So in response to what we've heard, back in the early spring, we made some decisions about our policies and procedures, and we started to address them with discussions with bigger government and how that might impact the not-for-profit sector. So as a consequence of that, we've relaxed several and have adapted several of our program criteria to provide additional flexibility and to ensure organizations are able to continue to access the funding that we have. So some of the examples I'd like to just reiterate are that the HSS sector was opened early this year, and this was essentially to help those not-for-profits that were, again, helping the vulnerable populations. And some of the groups in this particular area are those that provide assistance to seniors. Others are food banks. Now, very easy to identify that these groups are really stepping up and trying to their best to accommodate the populations that they serve. We also relaxed the requirement to include the current year AGM. Again, pandemic is making it hard for people to get together. We've all learned new skills over the past 9 months, like how to hold AGMs via Zoom or symposiums. And so, you know, we can see that people are adapting, but we have provided that room in the meantime. Other groups will be much harder for them to learn these skills. So we relaxed operating surplus criteria as well. And this is for the return applicants, recognizing that cash flow management is going to be extremely difficult to do once you don't know where your funding is coming from. We also understand that there's been numerous other government programs stepping in from the feds and the provincial level to help not-for-profits. But in the meantime, we're still here, we're still doing what we've always done in the past, is that continuing to support ongoing programming. We also relaxed our 75% cap on government funding, again, to tie in with those other programs that are being offered in this emergency period. Now, we also know that trying to manage these programs is pretty difficult. We used to have that 12-month expenditure timeframe. We've expanded that for the time being to 24 months, and that's to give those organizations that have had to reduce perhaps some of the services that they've provided. So they may have got the same level of funding in the past, but now they can't service as many people as they did in the past. So we're giving everyone the chance to spend that money at a slower rate if that's what is needed for their particular situations. Others, like we thought the food banks might be expending their funding faster. So that's why we had the opening of the sector earlier. In addition, we understand that some programs are going to be impacted by the delivery model. And in the past, we've required that organizations continuously deliver the programming. Well, we know that there have been various types of shutdowns and restrictions on grouping of people together. And so we're not being as strict with that particular requirement either. And so we want to see organizations continue to apply is the main thing that we were doing with these relaxations of the past rules. So we've been communicating as much as possible these temporary changes through our COVID-19 updates FAQ page. And we've also been taking phone calls and emails as per usual, trying our best to assist organizations that have questions. It's very difficult. Everyone has got unique situations, and sometimes the FAQ page doesn't meet quite that circumstance. As we're still in the midst of the pandemic, all of the measures that we had put up earlier are still in force, and we will continue to be applying them for the time being. The sector, HSS, Human and Social Services sector, is still open. And so if you haven't applied yet, it's not too late. You got until November 30th. And of course, we invite you to invite other organizations that may not have applied in the past to have a go at getting a community gaming grant. So I have a few stats as well to say for the current year. So as of mid-October, we've had over 3,000 applications been processed and approved. So that's been a great number. We still have another 2,000 or so to go by the end of the fiscal year. And I think, let's see what else I've got here. That's it, Denise, save me.
All right. Okay, so now we're moving into the what's next portion. So we're looking forward to next year already. So yeah, we've been busy preparing our annual update to the guidelines. As you all know, we tend to do this around this time of the year. We start our preparations so that we've got refreshed guidelines ready to roll out when the new grant year opens. So as usual, these updates are meant to just keep continuously improving the program, and the policy changes that that you see reflected in the guidelines are collected throughout the year from applicant, stakeholder, and staff input. So just ways that we can make the program better and more responsive and easy to understand for all applicants. Obviously, we recognize the coming year is going to look a lot different than what it normally does. COVID-19 is still here among us. It's very much still a going concern. And we know that not-for-profits are continuing to feel impact, so we're not through it yet. And we've been looking at the guidelines with this in mind, very much so, and we're still in the process of figuring out how this is going to look. But like usual, we'll aim to publish the guidelines as early as possible to make sure that organizations have as much time as they can with the updated guidelines so that they have this in hand before they submit their applications. So the other thing that we've been working on for the next year is we'd like to do a bit more in terms of our public reporting on our program, so we can better highlight the program itself, but also the great community programs that this program is able to support. So what we have next is a really neat infographic that Amy put together. And it's based on our 2020-2021 data, so for our current grant year. And we wanted to give you kind of a sneak peek of what this looks like, and our intention is to be able to produce something like this for each sector, to be able to kind of highlight what that sector is doing and how the grant is helping those programs be delivered throughout the province, and to really kind of tell the story of that sector and in terms of what's going on in BC. So I'm going to just flip through what that looks like, and you can all take a look-see. So yeah, so as I said, the infographic here is based on the arts and culture sector for our current grant year. Because they open the earliest, we have the most recent and complete set of data, so that's why we're picking these guys. But essentially, we're hoping that what follows will kind of be our template for what we'll have for all of the sectors. So what we'd like to do, I mean, we saw that slide earlier where we were able to talk about what the sector as a whole received, but what we'd like to be able to show is across the sector in each of the subsectors, how much money was allocated to each of those different areas, because the sector is diverse and it's not just one monolith, right? We also want to be able to show how much that sector received, as well as how many unique organizations were able to receive funding from the sector grants. And we also want to be able to show where the funding is going across the province, so which economic regions are receiving how much. And we want to be able to show how many unique communities across the province were able to receive funding for their programs. And another thing that we thought was important to highlight was a couple of kind of key stats, so things like the applicant success percentages in that sector, how much of the funding is going to be able to support children and youth, Indigenous British Columbians, and to support persons with disabilities. And finally, we kind of want to wrap it all up with a few examples of programs that we're funding in that sector. So we've got some pictures directly from the organizations who are putting on the programs and a little kind of excerpt of what they offer and how much they received. And again, this is just to really illustrate the great things that are happening across communities in BC and really kind of give an exact example of the types of things that we're talking about. So yeah, more of this to come. And as I say, we're hoping to be able to do this for all the sectors. So if you don't see yourself represented in this example, there will be one coming for you for your sector. So stay tuned. Okay, so we've kind of gone through the before, during, and after of our grant year, and now we're going to dive into some deeper dives on specific topics. So this one here I'm going to cover off is around the program description. So I understand that people submit some really great program descriptions. Some folks still find this area a little bit challenging. So we thought we would spend a bit of time going through the program description and what it is that we're hoping to see, and point out some kind of areas that seem to be patterns around there being a little bit more challenges than others. So just being able to provide a little more information for you guys when you're thinking about putting together your program description for next year. So, the program description really is the backbone of the gaming grant application. It's the main place for you to really tell us about your program, how it works, all the key information that we kind of need to know to understand what it is that you're asking for funding for. As we've mentioned, I think before, like we receive quite a few applications. We receive around 6,000 applications every year. And when the grant analyst is looking at your application, they see everything. So they're not experts in any one area, they're generalists. So you really need to kind of fill in the blanks for them and be able to describe exactly what it is that you do and how you do it so that they're able to really understand what's in front of them. So some of the key challenges we've noted here, one is that there's not enough detail on the program and what's being presented is a bit too vague. So when we see things like, in the program description, they describe childcare program, and that's kind of all it says. That doesn't really tell us too much. We don't know what you do on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. And things like this can impact your grant amount if we just don't have any way of really assessing the scope of what you're asking for funding for. So yeah, more specifics are always a good idea. The second is that sometimes we'll see an organization talk about high-level benefits of their program or similar programs like it without actually explaining the details of their specific program. So for example, we might see something that says, arts are essential to civil society and involvement with the arts and theater can address mental health issues, build community, help individuals explore their personalities, and so on. All of that is great, but we need to know specifics. So how does your program do these things? So I think again, it's in the details that we really need to see. The third is it ties into the issues above, or we need to see stats and key figures and things like that to really be able to quantify what it is that you're asking for funding for. So description is great, but the other half is in kind of quantifying and building out with specifics what your program does through that key information and figures. So for example, if you're a literacy association, tell us how often is your organization open for drop-ins? How many clients have you served? If you're a sports program, what ages do you serve and how often are your events? How many volunteers do you have? What's your season? So the other thing to note about including stats is that it's very, very important if you want to be able to show that your program has grown. And we'll talk a little bit about this later on, but it is really important to be able to show that quantifiable growth in your program description, where we can see that things have grown year over year. And then the last is around things about buzz or photos, testimonials. These are all excellent, but they can't replace the specific details of your program. So these are really kind of considered like examples or illustrations of what you've already told us in your program description. So, this has kind of been, I guess, a reoccurring sort of challenge for organizations. So we did update our guidelines in section 4.4 to be able to kind of add topic areas that we want organizations to be able to speak to, and then some bullets that we want basically answered through the program description. So what I advise people when I talk to them is when you're preparing your application and specifically your program description, take a look at this list in the guidelines and make sure that your program description can speak to all of these points as relevant. So I'll go into just a little bit more what some of those points are. And again, just folks often write in kind of vague or high level terms, but we want to be able to understand, broadly what it is that you do, but also we want to know specifically how you do or what you do and how you do it. So the key is really in providing specific details and being clear and concise and speaking to your program. So, if you're a childcare program, tell us things like when your program is open. How many staff do you have? Do you have any volunteers? How many kids attend? What are your hours? When are you open? What's the ethnic or economic diversity of your program? Do you have any special attributes that make your program different from other programs? Another example, if you are a search and rescue program, tell us, what areas do you serve? How many staff do you have? How many volunteers? How many call-outs do you respond to every year? And how many hours do you spend training your staff or volunteers? The other thing to note is that we do have some sectors that are required to provide additional information with their application. For example, with sport, we ask that the program description tells us how the program provides access for all people of all abilities and skill levels to be included in their programming. We also ask how many participants your program has served over the last 12 months, so the number of unique people served through all of your various programs and activities for the past year. And we also ask for the total number of participants in each discrete program activity that you serve. So the unique total number of participants would be, say you have a soccer program that runs the entire year, but you might have a fall season, a spring season, a summer season. So you would want to know how many unique people showed up over the 12 months, but also how many people are in the fall program, the spring program, summer program, and so on. But for this, just check the guidelines to see if there are any specific pieces of information that are required for your particular sector. And I thought we would just go through a couple examples just to kind of really drive it home what we're looking for. So this would be considered a poor description. So I'll read it out and we'll see what the difference is between this and the good example. So the XYZ Support Service Society provides outreach and support services that help residents reconnect with their greater community and address mental health issues. As our communities become more disconnected in today's fast-paced world, it is important to help people of all ages build stronger bonds. This can help address depression, loneliness, and numerous health issues. So, that all sounds great. But when we would look at something like this, we really wouldn't have any idea how your specific organization works and how they accomplish all of these things. So we would need to know more specifics, and we would come back and we would ask, okay, so what is it that you do? What activities do you offer? Are you going out into the community? Do you offer space for people to come and participate? When does that happen? Again, tell us what you do and how you do it. So here is an example of a quite good program description. It's very strong. It's got a lot of specifics. So again, the Outreach and Support Program provides residents in Saanich of all ages with a location to access mental health support, obtain community information, and socialize. We are open from Monday to Friday from 9 to 5 p.m. And welcomed over 2,500 people in 2020. On Mondays from 9 to 12, we have a seniors drop-in program where people can play games, purchase coffee, read, or book time with a registered support counselor. In 2020, our counselor met with over 150 residents and over 1,500 came to the drop-in sessions. And we will use $14,000 of the grant money to pay for the counselor's wage and another $1,500 to print outreach materials. So here again, there's several specifics. There's lots of stats and quantifiable figures. We have a very good sense of what's happening, where it's happening, and when it's happening, and who's being served. So this is kind of the the key stuff that we're looking to see when we are looking over your program description. So hopefully that's helpful, but as always, and with everything, we're always here to help you guys, and so is the BCACG, to look over your program descriptions, answer any questions that you have so that you can put forward the best description that really captures all the great stuff that you do. Okay, so now I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about the Gaming Account Summary Report, also known as the GASR. So there are a few areas again here that folks have a little bit of difficulty with, and we thought we would just quickly go over them and point you towards some more resources when it comes time to preparing yours. So what we have here is just a little snip of a sample GASR that we have up on our website that we filled in with some information. So we encourage you all to take a look when you're preparing yours. But yeah, basically, as you all know, you've likely all done this before. The GASR has to be submitted to the branch within 90 days following the organization's fiscal year end. Sometimes we get some that are late, so we thought we would mention the standard around when that should be submitted to us. And the GASR is really meant to detail all the activity in the gaming account during the fiscal year. And this also includes any funding that you may have received from the Capital Grant Program. But we wanted to note that where you would list the disbursements for that is on a supplementary document that can be found on our website. So the Gaming Account Summary Report must list all disbursements and/or reimbursements from your general account that are made from the gaming account. And it must include details about each of those disbursements or expenses. The expenses must be shown on a cash basis for any gaming funds that you spent during the year. And we'll talk a little bit more about how to show those disbursements in a second here. And the other thing to note is that the GASR is also a really good opportunity to tell us about the programs and services that you delivered during the year. And that would be in the community benefits section of the GASR. And this is where you can provide information on who benefited from the program, as well as numbers. So how many people, how exactly did they benefit? And the little tip here is that by doing this here, this can be parlayed into your program description for next year. So you'll get a bit of a head start on that, and you can just take from there and have that consistency throughout. And also, obviously, the GASR must have all required signatures of those who have written and/or approved the report. So that's another key piece. So the next section that I have here is just a little snip of section 5, which is where you would list your gaming proceeds and disbursements from the gaming account. This example that we have filled in here is from that example GASR that's up on our website, which we encourage you to take a look at. So for the disbursement list, some people opt to provide this on the form like we see here. Others prefer, if they have quite a few or just for their own ease, they like to provide this as an attachment. So they would just say, see attachment and include that when they submit to us, and that's perfectly fine. In either case, whether you provide that list of disbursements on the form or in the attachment, what we need to see is the date of the disbursement, the check, electronic funds transfer, or reference number of that particular expense, who the funding was dispersed to, and the purpose of the disbursement. So this was where you would provide any necessary details so that it answers any questions that we might have when we're reviewing the GASR. So when we look at a line expense, we understand who it went to, when, how, why, all those things. And the disbursements here should all align with your financial records. So there's a paper trail of all the gaming funding that you had spent throughout the year. Again, there's blank GASRs on our website. There's an example GASR on our website, which has all of this information already filled in, so you can take a look. So we encourage you to look at this when you're filling out your next GASR to submit to us. And that is it for me for the moment. So I'm going to pass it over to David now, who's going to talk about best practices for board communications. You're on mute, David.
Fantastic. All right, somebody had to do it, might as well be me. Thank you very much, Denise, for that. So what I am doing here on this portion is kind of new. And if we could go to the next slide, please, Denise, is that I'd like us to express to you that I definitely feel that there should be more communication happening within your organizations as a general rule. There are some of you that are doing great. Others maybe could use some of the hints that I'm proposing in this particular section. And so what we're talking about here is that with every application, we give out a written notification, and that notification is sent via email to the account that was supplied upon the application. Generally, that is the email of the application submitter. Now, the application submitter may be a paid staff member, such as a director or executive director of the organization. It may be a volunteer person within the organization, or it could be a board member. But as we don't actually monitor that per se, we just make sure that it's going to a valid email account. It's up to we feel it's up to the responsibility of that receiver to make sure that their organization is aware of what was said in that notification letter. We're looking at trying to improve that portion of the business, by the way, by increasing the number of email accounts that can be used. So why is this notification letter so important? Firstly, it tells you how much money you may have got, or if you didn't, and the reason for that decision. Upon review of that decision, you could also determine if perhaps a mistake has been made by the branch. So if there has been a mistake, you have an opportunity, of course, to submit what's called a request for reconsideration. If everything is fine, we would like you to make sure that the board is aware of the decisions. And the matter for that is sometimes there are non-critical issues that have been addressed in the letter, but the board should be aware of. Perhaps the reporting isn't quite up to snuff. The board should be aware of that and then be able to ask questions or provide extra guidance and support to the staff that are putting together this information. So in general, we really want the board and the paid staff to have an ongoing dialogue concerning the programming that they're delivering and how it's being received by the Community Gaming Grants Branch. Perhaps there are some comments such as what Denise has mentioned earlier about details. Usually that's quite easy to do. You guys know what you're doing and you're able to give us that information without much effort. And so we're recommending that that this becomes a regular feature of your agendas, that communications from the branch are made more wholly expressed within your organizations. And so also since the beginning of COVID, we've had an increase in the number of communications with the branch, often on behalf of the staff of that organization. And that's great, but sometimes we're unsure of how much involvement the board has with that level of communication that we're getting. So we would like in future, if possible, that you try and ensure that your board is aware of the communications, and that if necessary, if it's a big issue, perhaps the board representative, such as the president, contact the Community Gaming Grants via email or telephone to express the requests that are being made. We feel that this will give us a better reassurance that the ongoing dialogue between what's being said to this application submitter and what's going out from us in the notification letter is being expressed throughout the organization.
David, it's Caroline. I'm just going to give you a 3-minute warning so that we have a few minutes left for questions.
All right, I think that's about it. We just really want that good practices of internal communication be adopted by organizations.
So Amy, I'll quickly turn it over to you.
Okay, noting the time, I'm sure there's a lot of questions, so I'm just going to fly through this quickly. But this is a question that we get a fair amount. It's, how can we request an increase in our program funding? Some orgs, are frustrated to see that, getting the same grant year over year. So I definitely would say that, you know, as I think everybody knows, our budget has been consistent for a number of years. So, you know, depending on demand for the program's resources, sometimes, you know, funding increases just simply aren't available. We need to make sure that we can provide funding for all of our eligible applicants. But occasionally there is some room for movement in terms of funding level. So I think just basically what I would say is in order to make a case for an increase to the program staff, the most important point is that your argument needs to be based on what's happened over the previous 12 months when you apply. So, you know, we often get requests for additional funding saying, you know, looking forward, we're hoping to expand our program, or looking over the next 6 months, we're hoping to hire another staff person to, you know, increase the number of people that we can serve. And that's not really in line with kind of the program's parameters. So what we're looking for is organizations to say, hey, look, over the last 12 months, we've served double the number of people. Over the last 12 months, you know, our revenues, you can see that our revenues and expenses have increased substantially. So it's just to say that the business case that we're looking for to request an increase is really backward looking. I know that may be a little bit counterintuitive, but it's to say, you know, hey, look what we've done over the previous 12 months. You can see our program has grown. We really need this extra money to kind of keep that going. So, oh, and a really important point, if you do want an increase in funding, you must use a regular application form. Do not use the renewed funding. We often get requests for increases on a renewed funding form. We cannot provide it according to the guidelines. So just a reminder, please use the regular form. And, you know, Denise talked about the importance of providing statistics. So that is key in terms of making this case. And I think I'm gonna just leave it there because I do want to make sure we got plenty of time for questions.
Thanks,
Great.
Amy.
Thanks.
I was just going to say we will share the slide deck around. So there's a couple more slides that basically reiterate what Amy is saying, so you won't miss out on those. We're going to jump in next to questions, but I'll leave this key contacts list up. This is how you can get a hold of us, or if you need to get a hold of the Gaming Policy Enforcement Branch, if you want to talk about any licensing or events questions that you might have. And always BCACG is available to help as well. Yeah, I think I'll leave the slide up, and I think David was going to kick us off into questions.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Just as a heads up to everybody, because the new government hasn't been formed yet, we won't be able to talk about prospective things that the new government may engage in, because we haven't been given those directions and we don't have a minister at this time. So just as a little bit of a preamble there, that some of the questions we may not be able to answer just as we don't have the information. So looking at the very first question, I see that Zoja wrote that she has tried to fill out an application twice and has received an online messaging error. This has been happening. We don't know why. Some organizations have been getting this. What we recommend is that you do the regular stuff, such as clearing your cookies, cache, and then restarting the application. If you're using Internet Explorer and that's not working, try Google Chrome or some other browser. If all of that doesn't work, contact the branch in plenty of time. Make sure you communicate with somebody and that we are acknowledge that we received that you're having a problem. That'll be the very first steps. Then we'll get back to you and see what we can do to help out. But we recognize that some organizations are having that issue. Don't delay, get your applications in as soon as possible. The last few days of the sector are crazy. Okay, let's move to the next question. Given that the casinos are closed, do you anticipate gaming grants will be reduced the next year? We're into a question that unfortunately I can't answer at this time. However, there's not a direct correlation at this time between casino revenues and gaming grants. Growth will be constrained by COVID. Assume this will be taken into consideration as long as pandemics affecting programming. Yes, we're taking all of that into consideration. However, there are some organizations, food banks, those helping seniors that are actually seeing increases in the demand for their services. So it's a mixed bag. 5,000 plus organizations that we deal with out of 24,000 in the province. We're getting a significant cross section of what's happening out there. Given that 20% of the people or more in BC are over the age of 15, have either a physical or cognitive disability, while only 9% of funding went to that specific group of people. That is those organizations that self-identified upon the application that they are specifically corresponding their services to those vulnerable groups. However, with the large group of funding that we give, we know that we're capturing other people as well. So there are limitations to the amount of data that we're asking for. This also translates into a little bit of an easier application, we're hoping. So it's a grab bag between the two. We recognize that that number may look low, but I'm sure it's underreporting what's actually happening out there. Sheila has written, is the presentation being recorded? I believe so, Kalina.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
And let's see what other questions we got here. Would backward looking include stats on the ways the programs fell short and how many people were not able to benefit due to capacity limitations? Yes, that can be very useful in us assessing the demand on your program. So not just what you did, but what you couldn't do can also be very informative for a grant analyst. Good question. When will we know when we are approved from this fall's application submitted? So generally, it's about 12 weeks for the internal processes to get the application reviewed, and then we have to get some higher levels approvals before we can continue. So generally 12 to 16 weeks before you get a notification letter. If it's getting longer than that, and you've checked the online status page, and you're seeing it doesn't look like anything's happening, you're more than welcome to contact the branch to see if we've made sure that we've got your application and that we in fact recognize that we have it. Next question from Carol. If an organization has been receiving gaming funds for specific programs significantly below the 75% cap on government funding and receives new government funding for a new program, are the caps on government funding for each program or overall total budget? It's by each specific program. And again, this year with the all the COVID related issues, we've relaxed that rule to a degree. I don't think I can specifically answer the question on how much funding the seniors, Vicki. Is that right, Denise?
No, I don't think we have those stats at hand.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Again, it's just a limitation about how much information we ask for and then are able to regurgitate back out to the public. Gail writes, as a community theater, we have been closed since March 2020. When we are allowed to reopen, do we use the information from 2 years ago as we have been closed for this last year? I would do that, but again, I would provide additional information to explain why you have not been open for the past year. It may seem obvious to you that COVID 2020 was the reason, but the grant analysts are assessing large volumes of organizations' applications. We don't always know what's going on. So state the obvious, you can't go wrong with us.
David, I think we missed a question from Holly just above.
Okay. How do you feel fairs and festival applications will be looked at due to gathering limitations? We're going to just do the best that we can. Some organizations are doing more online things, and such as symposiums. So we're rolling with it just as everyone else at this time.
Yeah, I would just say this year for the larger fairs and festivals, we did kind of do a project to get in touch with applicants directly. And we kind of talked with them and asked them what their plans were, figured out which large scale events were canceled. And for those organizations kind of came to a resolution where, we did put a pause on funding temporarily, But as Denise mentioned, like orgs won't be penalized for a break in service or anything like that. So we're kind of trying to err on the giving orgs the benefit of the doubt if they were unsure whether programming would be delivered. That's why we brought in kind of the extended rule for time to spend the funds up to 24 months. So.
Okay, David, I've got a couple of more questions that weren't in the chat that were pre-submitted. I
Okay.
appreciate your blasting through all of those. That was great.
Maybe too fast?
No, I thought it was pretty good. A couple of more people asked about the casino close funding question. So that one's sort of in abeyance for a while.
Yeah.
Here's another one. A lot of our programming is full of action. Can we attach short videos with our application?
I
believe the short answer is no, right?
Yeah, no, we don't really have the mechanism to upload those. You could include a link for sure, but again, going back to what I was saying, you know, those kind of examples are great and they really help to highlight and illustrate, but we do need to see that written in the program description itself.
Okay, and I suspect that this one, it's quite a long question, but I suspect you covered it with the 24-month period to spend funds. This group has held back gaming funds to bridge the gap because of COVID, and they want to know if they can apply for the same amount of the fiscal year, and I think the short answer is yes, they can.
That's the approach that we're taking, yes.
Yeah. And here's another one. Will the COVID relaxations that we saw this year from the gaming branch, will those be changed in writing in the new guidelines issued in 2021? And again, I think you sort of addressed that.
Yes, we don't have a minister by which to run all of our program details by, so it would be unfair to constrain the incoming government in that manner.
So we'll just recommend people keep looking at the FAQ page on the website?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. That's good to know. And this one again would be likely ministerial related. After we heard from the CEO of Imagine Canada this morning, he talked about the long-term loosening of restrictions by funders, particularly in the US, but also in Canada. And just the question that came in was, do we anticipate long-term loosening of funding restrictions by the gaming branch in 2021? So again, that's probably ministerial related.
I would put it in that category.
All right. Good. Well, are there any more questions from anyone? We have some very positive comments about you all in the chat room. So thank you everyone for posting those comments. Do you have some more questions, Kalina?
No, I'm looking at the same chats I think that you guys are looking at, and I think David, thank you for, like as Caroline said, blasting through all the questions. And yeah, I see more positive comments coming in for you guys. So thank you so much for doing a great job for us.
It's really our pleasure.
And we will have the recording will be available at some point. Our technical team is handling that. It generally takes 24 to 48 hours, and we do have all day today and all day tomorrow. So I would say that we'll have information for you early next week. Those links will be posted. So thank you very much for everyone for attending. Please remember the 2 workshops that are coming up right after this, one short break for about 10 minutes. And we hope to see you at the BCACG AGM at 12:30. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Everyone.